What is up, everyone? I am TST's the Mudman. It's time to figure out what we are going to be playing this weekend ranked in Gods Unchained. But first things first, these 10 lucky commenters won 6.9 gods each last week, courtesy of Caution Fun and his Council of Mortals salary. If you would like to be a lucky mortal to win 6.9 gods this week, all you have to do is be subscribed to the channel, like this video, comment your Discord ID, as well as what deck you'll be playing this weekend, and you could win 6.9 gods. The winners will be selected live on Twitch. The channels are in the description below, and let's get right back into it. So we are on GUDecks.com looking at the Mythic meta over one day because we did receive a pretty substantial balance patch just a few days ago. Both magic archetypes were nerfed, both control magic and tempo magic. Tempo magic had a very minimal nerf, control magic was nerfed quite a bit more. Control Light was also nerfed. War got some good buff cards. All in all, the meta has changed pretty substantially. And right now we're looking at gods based on popularity, and as you can see, Magic, Deception, and Light are all pretty much equal at around 18% of the meta. However, it's important to note that Zoolight is by far the most popular single archetype floating around the Mythic meta right now, and that's really important because the Zoolight archetype is a very polarizing archetype. They play creatures and then they buff the creatures, and that's how they win. So if you can remove their creatures every turn, then they have no path to victory, but if you let them keep their creatures around, then they're going to buff them and make them very hard to remove and really capitalize on their board state. So this week, if you're not playing Zoolight, you're going to have to really think about making your deck capable of destroying creatures every single turn, whether it be with powerful removal spells or relics or blitz creatures. But if Zoolight is going to be prevalent in the meta this weekend, you're going to need to be able to remove creatures every single turn. But let's get back to it. When you run into Magic this weekend, despite the fact that both Control Magic and Tempo Magic have been nerfed, both archetypes are very popular. However, I imagine Control Magic will be less and less popular as the weekend goes on because it did get nerfed quite a bit more than Tempo Magic, with both their second Shattering card as well as More Mag getting nerfed. Then we have Deception. Deception's most popular archetype is definitely Aggro Deception, which makes sense because Aggro Deception has historically been pretty good against Zoolight, because Zoolight uses creatures for everything, and Deception's creatures are hidden, so they're very hard to interact with. We've already discussed Light. For Death, their most popular archetype is certainly Zombie. However, Anubians are also common on the ladder. Over the line Death, in my opinion, is the strongest Death deck, and there's always a chance you run into board wipe Death, but that's a very unpopular archetype. Zombies and Nubians are definitely the more popular ones. If you see your death opponent picks Blood Ritual God Power, they're likely Nubians. If they pick Soulburn, they are definitely zombies. Next up, we have Nature, which is predominantly, aggressive wild nature. I imagine Nature is not going to perform very well this weekend, considering Aggro Nature's game plan is very similar to Zoolight's game plan. It's just worse. Their Wildfire comes down a turn after, Light's Radiant Dawn, so Light can play Radiant Dawn, make all the value trades. Now there's nothing to Wildfire. So, in conclusion, Nature does what Light does, but worse, so I did not recommend playing Nature. And then War is the least popular god. Like I said in the beginning, War got a couple of powerful creature buffs. They have a new protected and frontline creature. They have a fun new Tempt Fate creature. And War in general has always been very well equipped to deal with Zoolight, especially Control War. There's a lot of blitz creatures and relics in Control War, and those are very good for dealing with Light's creatures. So I imagine War will become far more popular as the weekend goes on. But now that we've done that brief overview of the meta, let's look at some potential lists you might want to play this weekend. Alright, let's start things off with the most popular archetype and the best performing archetype of last weekend ranked event, Zoolight. This list was made by TSTeam. He went 17 of 18 with it last weekend, so a nearly perfect weekend run. And it's a fairly standard Zoolight list. As you can see from the curve, the majority of our cards cost between 1 and 2 mana, so it's very difficult to brick, and you can start playing creatures very early. We have lots of powerful 1-drops. We have our Drider, we have our Pacifist, we have our new Light's Levy, which is really a 3-drop. Vexing Vicar is incredibly hard to remove. We have the Vesper, which is perfect relic removal in the meta right now, considering the most common relics are Skull Scepters and Necroscepters, and those both have 1 durability, so it's excellent relic removal at the moment. Then, we have normal cards like Fellow Janissary to buff those aforementioned powerful creatures, Inquisitor Informant to, turn off a frontline or just guarantee an opposing creature can't make any value trades for 2 turns. Obviously, we have Radiant Dawn, and then we enter our heavy hitter cards of the deck. We have General Grievous, who's capable of growing to gargantuan proportions, and he makes a little General Grievous as well. We have Highborn Knight and Cern, which are great cards on their own. All three of these creatures line up very nicely with Canonized to make them extra big and do lots of damage. Then we have Asterius as your final bit of AoE buff. In the neutral slot, we have both of the White Plains cards, which is very common. These cards are great in pretty much any deck, but they're extra good in Light. Blade of White Plains is excellent in Zoolight. Zoolight is always trying to build a board, and Zoolight has an issue where they don't really have any card draw or resource generation. So this is a creature that destroys a creature and draws a card. It does everything that Zoolight is trying to do. It's very powerful in this deck. And then Martyr of White Plains is also incredibly powerful, mainly because of the way it lines up with cards like Highborn Knight and Cern. And like I just said, Light has a hard time generating more resources, and this does technically generate you one more resource. But you can play this on turn 3, your opponent removes it, then you play Highborn Knight, they use a bunch of resources on the Highborn Knight, you get your Martyr back, another Highborn Knight in hand. It's a very powerful combination. Both of these cards are excellent in Zoolight. But besides that, this is a fairly standard Zoolight list. Zoolight is very powerful at the moment right now, so if you're a fan of the Zoolight archetype, a list like TSTeam here could be an excellent choice for this weekend ranked event. Alright, next up we have Hidden Rush Deception. This list was made by Mirage88, and historically, Hidden Rush Deception has been very good against Zoolight, mainly because Zoolight uses creatures for everything, and hidden creatures are impossible for other creatures to interact with. And Mirage's list here puts extra emphasis on hidden creatures. The only creatures in this deck that don't have hidden naturally are Pyramid Warden, Lady Marcella, and Axelman, but Axelman is removal half the time anyway. So everything else is hidden, which means Light's creatures have a very hard time interacting with them. And then on top of that, Hidden Rush Deception is notorious for being able to deal lots of damage very quickly. We do have our 2 copies of Dark Knives, of course, our 2 copies of Assassin's Aims, the Selfless Guildmate, and then, of course, Merrick to capitalize on that buff damage even further. So this is an archetype that's capable of outracing Zoolight. It's also an archetype where its creatures are very difficult for Zoolight to interact with. So if you want to play an aggressive deck that isn't Zoolight and you don't want to lose to Zoolight, then an aggro deception list like Mirage's here could be a great choice for this weekend ranked event. Alright, now let's move on to Control War. This list was made by Aldous, and Control War is probably the archetype best equipped for dealing with Zoolight, which is the most common archetype on the ladder right now, and that is predominantly because all of their many Blitz creatures, some of which having Blitz and Twin Strike, and their many relics capable of destroying creatures on the turn that they're played. There's also some excellent AoE removal that Control War has access to. You have Carnage Sweep, which pairs very nicely with Leviathan Hunter. This is AoE that doesn't care how high a creature's health total is or how protected they are, it just gets rid of them, so it's very powerful in the meta. Then of course, we have other powerful cards, Demogorgon to heal you if you get to 7 mana. Soul Survivor is less good AoE than Carnage Sweep, but it still gets the job done. One interesting card of note in here is Anir, the Frozen King. Usually I think of Herdicus as your primary 6-mana creature for Control War decks, but the more I think about it, the more I like Anir in this current meta. Herdicus is capable of destroying a larger creature and then being a larger creature, but Anir is capable of destroying multiple creatures, turn after turn, and since Zoolight is the most popular archetype on the ladder right now, it sort of is forcing your Zoolight opponent to remove this creature, or Anir will remove many creatures every single turn. So I like this card a lot in the meta right now. And then of course we have to talk about the newly buffed creature, White Fur Guard. Last week this creature was like an 8-mana joke or something. Now it is a 4-mana 5/4 with Frontline and Empower 1. You will always be using the Empower cost. So it is essentially a 5-mana 5/4 with Frontline and Protected. That's an excellent stat line. Protected is arguably the best keyword. If it's not the best, it's definitely one of the best. And Frontline is always convenient provided your creature doesn't scale, and this creature does not grow. So this is an excellent creature. Aldous here only has 1 copy in his deck. I imagine as time goes on, pretty much every war deck will find a space for 2 copies of this card, and it's incredibly powerful. Just a very threatening creature for an aggressive war deck, which this deck is not. This is a creature that's very good for being buffed. It lines up nicely with another round. It lines up nicely with Red Fume Serums, as well as Overproof Brew. I always forget that card's name. But as far as a control deck is concerned, it's just a big body with Frontline and Protected. It's very powerful. This creature is very good. And like I said in the beginning, Control War is historically the best archetype equipped to deal with the Zoolight. So if you want to beat those Zoolight opponents this weekend and you're okay with playing 20-minute long games, then a list like all this is here could be a great choice this weekend. Alright, now we have Card Draw Magic. This list was made by Clutch, and the first thing we have to mention is Oni Spellsword did technically get nerfed in this most recent balance patch. As you can see, its base attack total is now 0. That's not the biggest nerf in the world. Everyone is aware that Oni grows very, very quickly. The nerf is most relevant in the Deception matchup. It's now much more susceptible to being Bound by Her Will or Umber Arrowed, Bound by Her Will being the much more threatening card. That being said, all you have to do is pair your Oni with 2 cards the turn you play it to play around that Bound by Her Will, but it's something that you definitely have to keep in mind if you get that Deception matchup. But besides that, this is a very normal Tempo Magic list. Tempo Magic doesn't have a fantastic matchup against Zoolight. In fact, certain Zoolight decks just almost automatically beat the Card Draw Magic. If a Zoolight opponent is running Protected Benediction or Holy Writ, then any Magic deck doesn't really stand much of a chance against that. That being said, a couple of well-timed Unbound Flames might be enough to get you there. And Tempo Magic is very powerful against every archetype that isn't Zoolight, and it does have some game against Zoolight. Like I said, it's definitely not a favorable matchup, but it does fairly decently. And besides that, Tempo Magic is a fun, fast deck. So if you're a fan of Tempo Magic and you are confident that you can, get those Unbound Flames on time against Zoolight, then this could be a great selection for this weekend ranked event. Alright, next up we have Over the Line Death. This list was made by Nakarub, and we're going to continue to look at everything through the lens of how well does this do against Zoolight. And Over the Line Death has a very interesting matchup against Zoolight. Obviously, this deck relies heavily on sleep mechanics with Siren of the Graves as well as Cannabis Quarter to, re-get those Siren of the Grave effects. And Light obviously has Radiant Dawn, which is capable of waking up their entire board and buffing the board, which is very dangerous for any sleep-oriented archetype. That being said, Zoolight is an inherently aggressive god, so they're going to get you to 15 or less health very quickly, turning on cards like Deathwish Thanatar as well as Possessed Acolyte, which means that you'll be able to deal that 30 damage from hand very quickly. So one important thing to remember when you're playing against Zoolight is you're going to want to definitely make sure you have a pip available on turn 5, so you can do your big Cannabis Hoarder play, Necronomics, into Over the Line for big damage. Maybe you can put some Thanatars or some Services on top to get that full 30 damage at one time. One very important thing to note if you're going to play Over the Line Death is the way that Light's Levy or any transform effect interacts with your creatures. This happened a few balance patches ago, but it's really important for this matchup, so I'm going to bring it up again. As of now, if you transform, if you Light's Levy, new Light's Levy, a Possessed Acolyte, or a Rock Drake Egg, or even a Siren, those cards no longer go to the void. So you're going to want to make sure you destroy your Possessed Acolytes, your Rock Drake Eggs, any important Afterlife card you have the turn you play it if you're playing against those Light archetypes, because they are capable of transforming your card and then removing your win condition from the game. That being said, it's very easy to destroy your creatures, so Furic Rain usually gets the job done. Rock Drake Egg almost always gets paired with a Fleshbind or an Untold Greed the turn you play it. So, it should be easy to navigate, but you got to be cognizant of that when you're playing this archetype. But that being said, Over the Line Death is very strong. If it can get to 15 or less health quickly, it's capable of doing immense amounts of damage from hand that's just completely uninteractable. So if you are well versed with this deck, this could be an excellent choice for this weekend ranked event. Alright, and the last domain to discuss is Nature, and you can think of this deck list as sort of a bonus deck. Originally, I wasn't going to include Nature at all. Like I said in the beginning of this video, I don't think Aggressive Nature lines up very well against Zoolight at all. The only way Nature ever has a chance of winning is if they go first and they draw well. So I don't really recommend you play Nature at all. However, this Amazon Nature list here is really cool. The creator went 8-2 over 10 games, so it's definitely a fine deck. I'm mainly showing it off because, like I said, I think this deck looks cool and fun. So if you finish your weekend ranked run and you want to play some fun Amazons, this could be a cool down lap after your weekend run. But if you ask me if I think Amazon Nature will do well this weekend, that's a hard no. But this deck does look fun, so you might want to keep it on your radar. But let's jump into the conclusion. Alright, it is conclusion time. We talked about the meta, we looked at a deck for each god, and somehow only discussed Light the whole time. What is the conclusion? What should we play this weekend ranked event? Well, the answer should be obvious. Zoolight is an incredibly powerful archetype at the moment, but if you want to play Zoolight's foil, you could go with Control War, but whatever deck you go with, try to have fun. Tell us how you did in the TST Discord. Don't forget to comment your Discord ID as well as what deck you're going to play for a chance to win 6.9 gods, and have a wonderful day.
Hey you! Did you know that subscribing to the TST YouTube channel will increase your win rate by 6.9%? So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications. And while you're at it, equip Scythe of the Harvest and attack the like button directly in the face. Bye-bye!